Right, we'll start. Welcome back to AdBits. I'm Alex Grossman. Today's guest was born in Australia, moved to Naples at 16 to attend an Italian high school, came to London after a Bachelor of Arts, and started her career at the BBC. Since then, she's spent more than 16 years producing commercials, branded entertainment, social content, animation, still, music videos, and fashion films for Coca-Cola, L'Oreal, Boots, and Rolls-Royce. She's now an integrated executive producer working across Hogarth and Ogilvy, part of WPP. Her recent Kotex campaign, Art's Missing Period, brought together a documentary, an outdoor campaign, and a virtual gallery to expose the way menstrual art has been rejected, removed, and censored throughout history. It won gold and bronze at Cannes Lion. She's also deep into what AI actually means for creative production. So we'll get into whether it helps or just gives clients another excuse. Katharine Cowell, welcome to AdBits.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. I'm so flattered. I've been listening to your podcast and I have to say you're a very good interviewer. And I really like how you integrate your own ads into it. It's clever.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
As we were talking about before we started the conversation, I loved all this stuff. Your route into advertising isn't exactly conventional. You were born in Australia and Naples at 16, a Bachelor of Arts, then London and the BBC. What was the actual plan when you landed in Naples at 16?
I don't think I had one. I mean, like, I'd never left the country at that point. So how it came about was my sister had gone on exchange to a place called Caserta, which is outside of Naples. And she'd raved about it. And I was very settled I grew up in a place called Wollongong, which is about an hour and a half south of Sydney. Very parochial town, post-industrial on the coast. Stunning, but not a lot to do. And then I had this opportunity to go on exchange, and part of this exchange program is you don't know where you're going to go. So I had a friend actually in the end that had sort of ended up down the very south of Naples, Italy, in this really tiny provincial town, whereas I got put in the heart of Naples, and I stayed with I'd never met the family before. So I sort of landed in Rome with all people from all over the world, and then couldn't speak. I'd done sort of 2 years of Italian, but in any sort of schooling system that's not sort of set up for languages, you know, ciao, and that's about it. And then I lived.
And just to remind everyone, like Naples is not, even now. I was there like last year. It's pretty full on. It's not like it's not like it's a beautiful place in its way, but it's pretty. What's the word? I want to say rough.
Lively.
Yeah, lively. That's it. It's not. Yeah, I mean, you go there and you go to the other places. I mean, Naples is famously the place where they made pizza. They started with pizza, and you get to know that, and they love their football. But it's definitely got a personality compared to the other sort of more traditional Italian sort of beautified sort of touristy places.
No, it's wild. And 25 years ago, it was. I mean. The most famous Australian at that point was Megan Gale. If you ever know that actress, I think she popped up in that Mad Max film with Charlize Theron. She was sort of one of the women at the very end of the world. And she'd been in all these famous telecom ads. So every time I met a Neapolitan, they'd be like, do you know Megan Gale? And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't know who she is. But I was sort of treated like a mini celeb. They'd never met an Australian before. I was so innocent and I was so wide-eyed. I got up to mischief, but I never got into trouble, and I was never in danger. And I'd walk through what's now very touristy, but the Centro Storico, which is like really like where the washing hangs in the streets, like the heart of Naples. And I'd sort of like so I was at school, but I couldn't understand any of the coursework. So while all my friends were at home studying, I just walked the streets of Naples, and I'd go to like pastry shops and butchers, and everyone would just feed me. So I got about 10 kilos and I just ate my way through, learnt the language. But I think what's interesting about Naples and Sicily, I think, is before the unification, it actually had a lot of wealth. And you can see that there was so much wealth there. And it's sort of this like faded glory, and then now I think a bit more wealth coming in, but it's chaos. I mean, you've been there. And I've been there a lot since, but it was such a kind of a formative time, and it shaped my entire worldview. And then as a teacher at my high school had foreshadowed, I got the travel bug, and then I was just like, I have to get out of Australia. And that's I did my degree in very vague degree, sort of gender studies and languages and philosophy. And then I remember going to a careers advisor and asking what I could do, and he's like, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, what am I qualified to do? And there was nothing. So
just what you want to hear.
Just what you want to hear. And I had two girlfriends that were living in West Kensington in a share house of 25 other people, and they're like, oh, you've got a degree, come to London, you'll make money. I was like, this is great. You make this money. So I go, and it's like, you do your Office Angels typing course, and I was sharing a bedroom with sort of two other girls, like, so just hair straighteners everywhere, CDs everywhere, hair everywhere. And I think I got a temp job, and then eventually I worked my way into the BBC, but I didn't have a plan. I just wanted to have fun, and I did.
Yeah.
Really good time.
I'm glad it landed so well. And, did you know that producing suited you, or did you slowly realize you were good at organizing complicated people in complicated situations? I mean, was it a natural move for you?
I have a Virgo moon. So if you're not into astrology.
Sorry, I didn't laugh. My God, I got friends who say that to me, and I always start laughing. I'm so sorry. That was so unprofessional of me. Please explain to me what a Virgo moon is.
Yeah, well, look, for those of us that know our astrology, Virgos are very like pedantic and like really good attention to detail. I think fundamentally, and I was listening to your recording with Morgan. Actually, he said he was sort of too afraid to go to film school, and he did politics. And said, I always wanted to go to film school. My fundamental dream was to make a load of money, lols, as a 23-year-old temping, and then go to Spain and go to film school. And that didn't quite happen. I think I was a bit too early before the kind of the revolution where you could shoot stuff on your phone and all the rest of it. So I kind of found my way into, I was naturally organized. And I think I always wanted to know how stuff was made. And that's what drew me into production is just how is it all assembled? How is it made? And having seen it, I think advertising, because there is still, much as people bemoan the lack of budgets, there is money to play and to experiment, and to actually get the best crews and the best teams, that you can almost see it as a gold standard of craft, and then you can work out how you can make your own stuff within that. So, and I've been a bit distracted along the way as, moving into this role as EP, but I like some elements of producing. The people management, my mum was a clinical psychologist, she's now retired, and I think there's a lot in the management and the non-reactiveness. I think I'm quite non-reactive to the point where I probably internalize a lot of people's energies. But I think, you end up playing into your natural skill sets, which is probably organization, some degree of creativity. I don't know how creative a producer's role can be in advertising at times. I think it sits on the sideline. And then I think just knowing how to handle people, which feels vague, but it is so fun.
I don't think it seems vague at all when you talk about internalizing people's energies. I think that's the key when you're trying to put it all together, because if you're the one shouting, nothing's going to get done, and you've got to sort of take everything in and then sit back and go, right, how the best way to deal with this. I think that's a really clever way of putting it. I think a lot of people are doing that, but maybe not verbalizing it in the right way.
Well, I think honey attracts the most bees, and that's not so. Sometimes you have to be like mean mummy, and you have to be stern. But I don't like to go in this sort of I'm the one that with all the power. I think everyone has power, I think everyone has the power to do well and to perform well. And I don't think you get that from being really authoritative or entitled. So I kind of come at it from a place of humility. That's also because I listen to a lot of Stoic philosophy and a lot of Mel Robbins. So I think that's shaped my worldview.
I think there's no shame with that. Okay, so moving on. When you started, the job was comparatively easy to explain. A script, a director, a shoot, a finished film. Now, one brief might become a commercial, a documentary, a social campaign, an influencer partnership, a stills shoot, an outdoor installation, and hundreds of individual assets. Has the producer's job actually become more creative or mainly just more complicated? Feels like it's become a lot more complicated.
I think it's become so much more complicated. I think I mean, you mentioned the influencer partnership. I did a whole series of influencer-driven work last year, and I was so humbled. I hadn't heard of any of these people, but they had huge followings, and they were so sweet. But I just didn't know any of them, and so your normal kind of, it's sort of what we chatted about earlier offline, is the accepted wisdom of who is well known. Has completely changed, and equally the way people interact on platforms. You've got Twitch, you've got TikTok, you've got all these platforms that aren't necessarily, I mean, I certainly didn't grow up with them, so they're not native to me. And that's not to say it's an age thing, because there's sort of people that are far older than me that have navigated those platforms perfectly. But I think, you know, yes, you're right, it's not a simple 30-second, and it's airing on this date, and this is the deadline, and then after that airs, you've got a couple of weeks of just finishing up the paperwork. It's far more complicated and spreadsheet driven, and I think even within agency structures, it's so much more layered now. Whereas once you may have worked with a creative director, and that was about it. Now you've got layers of ECDs, CCOs that aren't always based in the country, so they're based in other offices. You know, Arts Missing Period, I was working with, the ECDs were based in London, Jen and Selma, and then our account team was based out of New York, and their CCO, I think, was in Madrid, and the director was based in the US. So there's a lot of stakeholders, all have really insane diaries. So you sort of end up doing a lot of diary management, and like, it's just a very iterative process. So I think it can lend itself to creativity to a degree in terms of who you partner, like who you put in terms of partnership. But I think creativity is very much still the preserve of creative teams. Certainly within, I think, WPP, I don't think producers have that creative cachet that they would in, say, TV or in film, where you are making a lot of editorial decisions. You might be asked your opinion, but you're certainly not a decision maker, I don't think. And that's been my experience. Others might report differently. I think it's different in different agencies too.
I think herding of cats is as they say, for most production roles, you know, and directing a job as well. You know, I think that's always been that's always been the part of the role of the producer. I think it's always just.
And also dealing with adults who sort of are 8-year-olds who you know will forget their passports and will sort of do all these things, and you think, how do you pay utility bills at home? Like, why have you all of a sudden become so infantilized? Like, they sort of infantilize themselves. And that,
I think I'm with you on that. I find that incredibly surprising when people are unable to do certain, for obvious stuff.
Obvious stuff. And I think it's this thing of, well, I'm creative and I can't, you know, I couldn't possibly. And you think, well, and they say that Tom Ford, who's sort of a great creative mind, knew exactly what units of his clothing were selling, and exactly, like, he had a business mind. And I think, like, I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
Well, his also his. I agree, and also his film that I've. What was it? What was that film? The Certain Man.
I was seeing. What was that? The everyone at home's going to say it's this.
That film that he made, which was like The Single Man, I think, wasn't it? A Single Man or something. It was so amazing, and it was so perfect and put together in such a perfect way. You could just. You could see that was a mind who wasn't forgetting any. That wasn't just someone coming on set and just going for everything was a paint frame. I mean, it was beautifully done. Yeah, he's very unusual. Anyway, back to what we were talking. But more continuing on what we're talking about. And I think this is also really interesting, because I find this at the moment that it's less time, but just from your perspective, are producers being given the time and authority to match what's being asked of them? I would say they're not. They're getting less authority and less time. But what would you say? You're doing it. You're in the thick of it in an agency.
I would agree with you. And also less resource. You're sort of doing twice as much with half the I was going to say manpower, I'll say woman power, people power.
Yes.
People power, yeah, you're doing twice as much with, and I think in agencies it's very administrative. There's so much paperwork, and by paperwork I mean just to get someone paid is about sort of 10 people involved. You know, from a finance point of view, I think there's also a lot of responsibility that sits on your shoulders from a compliance, a due diligence point of view. From you've mentioned AI, like that is a whole nother kettle of fish. So I think what I've noticed is they tend to spend ages in creative development, ages, and then they really compress the production time. And then of course everything's done at speed, and you can barely catch a breath. So I agree with you. It's more, but in less time. And there's so much you must know in order to, I think, protect the brand and protect the agency from a compliance point of view. And I don't think not everyone appreciates or realizes that, because I see a lot of naughty things happen, not necessarily within the group I'm in, but I see it in the ads play out sometimes. And I see like night trainers, and I think, how did that happen?
Yeah.
So I'm quite like diligent and like in that respect. So yes, long-winded, I agree with you.
So you're now sitting inside the agency world, and you've worked across a huge range of productions. What does an agency producer see on a brief that the production company picking it up never gets to see?
I mean, I suppose they would never have seen the 8 months of creative development to how we got to that point. I think that's it. And I think sometimes everyone's very siloed in their thinking. So I know, I've been on sets where the producer's sort of apoplectic about something. How could they do, and because they're very siloed in this, like, I'm just here to this one thing. And that's also true, but I think this is where the question of kind of empathy comes in. Because every now and then I'll meet an account handler and I'm like, how did you not know this? But then I think, well, I don't know about media buy. I don't know about account handling. I don't know about all the conversations they have on a day-to-day basis. So why should I expect them to know something that for me is a lot of common sense? But I think to answer your question, what the production company doesn't see is probably the original insight from the strategy team, probably the original creative development that's gone through so many iterations to get the messaging right. And to get, I think, because fundamentally they're the guardians of the brand, and they've got to kind of keep a tone of voice. That's what production companies don't see. Often they'll probably just see compressed timelines and reduced money. So often, but then that being said, I think some of the responses have been super positive to scripts I send, and they do really respond well. So it's not always fair to say that there's a criticism around compressed timings and budget. Sometimes it's met with like a lot of excitement. They could be saying that to you, because some scripts you send aren't amazing, but others are really special. And I think that's what I'd say. I don't think they just don't see it behind the curtain in the way that we don't see it behind the curtain. We don't see the conversations with all the stuff that goes into a pitch, all that work, the delicate balance of getting so many crew members in and all that goes on production company side.
I think it's so interesting you said that, because I keep hearing this again and again. And I used to work fully production company side. I now work service production company side, but I worked production company side for such a long time, for most of my career so far. And you would get scripts and you would have no empathy whatsoever. You'd just be like, what the fuck is this pig? What? I'd be angry. Emotionally, I'd be angered towards something, and I'd be given it. I'd be like, how is this? And what I'm realizing, and what I've realized now, is this siloed working, and just what you said, that entire process to get it down to here. I had no idea. You just didn't. It wasn't about no idea. It just didn't take on. I had no empathy for the process, and I think it's so important we all start having a bit more empathy for the process. I definitely remember I started when I was getting the brief through. I'd be like, so what are the areas we can't talk about? What are the taboos? Unfortunately, I say all this, and then obviously myself, I was on a shoot last year, and I walk on. It was a job we were servicing for a brilliant production company. Anyway, we won't go into too much details, but it had a creature feature on it, let's just say, and I walked in saying all the wrong words, and you could just see the eyes lighting up. I was like, "Hey, everyone, how's it going? Oh, this looks good. The creature looks like this," and there was just like this, like you could see the agency and everyone and the client, the eyes lighting up in the wrong way, unfortunately, because I was saying all of the things that you weren't meant to say, which were obvious in certain lots of ways. Obviously, hence why I said them. But yeah, it's so important to understand the background if you can, and
I think
taboo
so.
words.
Yeah.
Like, what's the score with this client? How much do they hate this script? You managed to push it through. Do they really, really like it? Or is it really tough? Was it a challenge? Who do we need to be nice to? Who do we need to throw some attention to on this shoot?
That's
I've
it.
always said a lot of times when we do a shoot, is it any, you speak to agency and clients especially, is it the first time you've been on a shoot? It's quite daunting being on a shoot for a lot of people. And it shouldn't be. It should be really, really fun. And it can be really exciting. And if there are those people who've never been, I'm like, right, come on, this. I'll take them around. I go, this is what this person does. This is what this person does. And I'll be like, this is the client paying for it. And everyone's like, oh, okay, fine. And why don't you explain what you're doing? And I think if everyone started doing a bit more of that, it would feel, because it's just so intense on certain shoot days, because you've got that 1 day or 2 days, and especially now you've got less time with more deliverables. So I keep saying to people as well, there's a lot of us talking about it, about making production fun again. They used to have the space and the time for it to be fun, whereas now the process is squeezed everything so tightly. It feels like everyone's a bit squeezed. Everyone is squeezed a bit more too tightly, and we need to sort of be able to let go a bit more, especially when it's meant to be a creative process.
And it's got to feel safe. I think that's what I remind myself a lot of the time with scripts I might receive or creative ideas, is that creatives are still, anyone that's issued, I think, and I believe everyone is creative, irrespective of what role you are. But in that specific role, if you're the creative, you are under pressure to deliver something that's considered engaging and interesting and creative in and of itself. And it's really vulnerable to be in that position, to put your work out there. And so when people are unkind, it's horrible. So I think there's got to be a kindness to it, like how we issue feedback, how we approach something of like, just no, I don't like that, that's shit. It's like, well, be kind about that, because I don't think you get the best out of people by making them feel psychologically unsafe. And I'm with you. I think really it boils down to, there's two schools of thought, isn't it? Look, the client has paid, but they've also instructed an agency and the director to deliver the vision. But I think that doesn't mean the client gets cut out of that, and they've got to feel a part of it, and they've got to have a good time, and everyone has to have a good time. And that really, I think, comes from the top down, doesn't it? Like if you've got a director that's quite approachable and warm, and they're producing, everything's gone well, and there's like a spirit of trust and collaboration. I think we've all been on sets when it's kind of turned hostile, and it's just awful. It's really hard to recover that energy.
Completely. So, and a question here from your side of the table: what makes a production company genuinely useful during a bid versus what makes you nervous on the first call?
I think I have to be totally honest. Bidding is one of my least favorite things. I hate letting people down, because I know how much work goes into it, and people put so much into it. And I'm you having to be very poker faced. I think there are signs. Sometimes people can be, and I think it depends. Like it's very personal, because other producers who have different personality types would respond differently. My personality type, I find when someone's quite bullish and quite, calling a lot, and being quite sort of, well, the budget's not good. The budget's just not good. And I'm like, then don't do it. Like, because I try not to, I do try and safeguard. I will not take a really bad budget to someone. I won't, like, if I can avoid it, unless it's something that's sort of maybe charity, or it's like a piece that's probably going to be a really good real piece. But sometimes there'll be a bit of that, or maybe you get talked down to a bit, like there's a bit of a now little girl, but in any case, when people sort of illustrate that behavior, I'm never really that activated, but I do park it and I think, okay, that's how this person's going to be, and I know how to navigate it. So that's other kind of behavior. I think no one likes it when a bid comes back and it's like so much over what you wanted it to be, because it's awkward, like if you've got a set budget from the client, and it takes a lot to then go back through the client structures, and they've got it. And because I think what people forget too is that clients have clients. So often there's an assumption that, well, can't the client just, and you think that client is in back-to-back meetings, that client's got contact reports, like all this stuff within their own client structure. They won't see their CMO for a week. So decisions just don't happen quickly anymore, as it must have done some time ago. There's a lot of hierarchy to navigate. And I think it kind of goes back to this thing about empathy, is it's understanding that. So to your point about bids, my red flags is a bit of pushiness, a bit of condescension. And my green flags are like just really collaborative. Like, this is what we're kind of thinking. Look, this is going to be over, and just having a really good conversation about that. So I've got time to have the conversations my side, to tell the agency, look, they're going to come in over. Are we comfortable with that? And then they're like, yeah. And then I go and tell the others that like the benchmark has gone up a bit, because I think there should always be parity of what I always write really clear bid specs so everyone has the exact same information, because and it's hard, and that's how I keep track too, because you are called a lot. Or if an idea is more expensive, it's having those conversations, trying to release more money. So the bid is it's a really tricky part. I don't know many producers that like that, because you're also working at absolute speed, and you're looking at all these like budgets coming in and what different approaches, and again, often you're kind of on your own. So it's always tricky.
We're going to talk about AI now. Of course we are. It had to come up, unfortunately, I know. Or not, actually. It's just the way the world is, and the way the industry is evolving. So you're also building your expertise, particularly in AI, across the creative industries. There's an enormous amount of noise around it, as we all know, usually from people announcing everything has changed 5 minutes after finding a new bit of software. I do know that, every day there's something new, isn't there? Where's it actually useful in production today? And is the real value still behind the scenes, research, planning, localization, versioning, rather than the finished creative?
Big question. I think AI is I mean, it's been there for a while, like predictive text, and I'm sure it's been embedded in loads of things we've never really realized. And I think obviously with the release of ChatGPT, it's kind of blown everyone's minds, because and a lot of people sort of outsource sort of cognitive heavy lifting to these platforms, like rewriting emails and that. I think in terms of production, there's a lot of efficiencies that can be done in post. I'm not probably close enough to the software itself to see how automated it can become from a versioning point of view and all the rest of it. From a production point of view, I think it can be good from conceptualizing things, but I often think with AI, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think there's something around the realism of it or not. And also, and I don't mean this in any cliched sense, I don't think anything can replace a really good idea, because I think fundamentally we as a people respond to story, and we've responded to story from being sort of primitive and in a cave around a fire. Like, there's a beginning, middle, and end, and something happens. And I think AI can maybe enhance visuals, and it can do certain things, but I don't think it could ever replace a really interesting creative insight. If you look at the Dove work, for example, which has a lot of impact, of social impact, I don't think an AI could ever generate that, because they wouldn't have access to sort of a child's insight or a parent's insight or a certain perspective. I don't think AI has any life experience. It has computational power, and it can, in some ways, it can help on an administrative sense. That's how one way I use it. But from a creative sense, and it can world build in a way that we've never seen before. But I think it's only as good as the people prompting, and you've got to have a filmmaker's vision or a creative vision in order to use it effectively. It's like having an Alexa Mini or a Red or whatever, but not knowing how to film. If you don't know how to light, if you don't know how to point, and if you don't know how to scene set, then there's no point having it. So, and when we may see a lot of always on content and content that comes out quick and dirty, but I don't think it'll be as memorable as the ads that people talk about or the content that people respond to. So it's disrupting, but we don't know where it's going to go. But I think it's always should be used to enhance an idea or to help conceptualize, but never to really replace, I don't think.
That's really good. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's the technology is there at the moment. Everyone's talking about it. I mean, it hasn't landed. I don't think it's landed anywhere. I don't think the companies that are making it have landed. No one seems to know where it all ends. There doesn't seem to be any endpoint at the moment.
And if you listen to enough, I guess, podcasts or just anything that's in the ether, it's like there's so many polarizing opinions, isn't there? Like
yes.
It's not sustainable from an environmental point of view. It's not sustainable from a cost point of view. It's going to start having advertisers on there as well, like to sustain it. It's funding. They also say that we use it, for tasks that we actually shouldn't be outsourcing our cognitive abilities for. So there's so much to this. But the one thing I would say about it though is that it's sort of democratized filmmaking in some sense. So if you were someone that didn't have access, and I remember, you'd have to shoot on a mini DV with a FireWire and get a cracked copy of Final Cut, and there were so many barriers to entry. And so yes, you've got a lot of digital landfill, but you've also got people that are able to express themselves.
Well, it's one of the positive sides of sorry to interrupt, but it's one of the positive sides of social media as well. It enables everyone to have access straight away.
That's right.
There is no gatekeeping, which is a hugely positive aspect of it. Sadly, though, like with all technology, if the guardrails aren't in, even basic ones, let's say, you get these deeply polarizing environments.
Yeah.
Which is we still don't know where social media is going, or what it's done, what the implications are. Now we've got artificial intelligence, which is just on a whole different level and phenomenally powerful, and we still don't really know where it goes, because the people who are creating these products on these platforms, they have no idea either. So
I think the people that are behind AI are sort of, they live in this tech bubble, and they probably have these sort of utopian visions of, well, it's a society in which no one ever needs work, and it's a leisure society, and we can pursue our interests, we have a universal income. But I think it belies the fact that people need purpose, irrespective of what your role is. And some jobs, give people a lot of purpose. I think creativity gives people purpose. So I think a lot of these guys, and they're mostly men, sorry to say, but like they think in theory, but not in lived experience or lived practice. And I think it's a bit of an arms race right now.
I think I couldn't agree more. I think the bigger issue is, which it seems to be that people are pretending isn't a real issue, is that these tech companies, the ones specifically focusing on AI, obviously, the thing they're not really talking about is they're all doing everything in their power, corrupting politicians, riding roughshod over any environmental aspects, anything, the implication, because they're all trying to get the AGI and a general intelligence. It's not about creating the best software platform. It's creating something that is a super intelligence, because whoever creates that first wins the whole game. So I think there's a lot of diversionary tactics. Everyone's like, oh, what's going on? It's just as simple as that. Like Meta, OpenAI, and Anthropic, they're all racing because that's what they've been, and that's why the government in America is like, go for it, because they're in this arms race, obviously, with China. And that's all it's about. They think they're going to create the next super intelligence. They're going to create something. And then once that's created, the day that happens, it's going to be like, you can look at it like the film Terminator, where it comes alive and everyone goes down. But they really don't know what the repercussions of that is. But all they do know is it will give them, they'll win the game. And no one will be able to win against that. I'm going to stop saying these things now because we're having an AdBits podcast and I shouldn't be talking about stuff like that.
Look, I think you're right. I don't disagree, and I think people are scrambling to try and sort of keep up. It's like it's a bit like, I mean, you could think of it as was it the tulips in was it the 18th century in Holland when it was tulip fever? Everyone's going to buy tulips. It's going to
wasn't that the big crash? The tulip. There was a massive financial. One of the most famous financial crashes was because of tulips.
Tulips,
is that right? So,
yeah. It's like you kind of wonder, like, again, going back to the siloed thinking, like, is it it's just everyone's just so obsessed with this advancement, and you kind of think, to what end? Like, what purpose is there to automate absolutely everything? I think if it's to drive down cost, to hoard more wealth, then that's probably what it is. So like, if you can make stuff for cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and save more and more money, like, all that does is just create more inequality, which I think is a huge problem right now. All that. So I don't really know where I sit, because there's some part of me that's quite not a realist, but I'm never sort of in opposition to and I have my own set of values and morals, but I think it's there. You can't wave your fist at the sky. All you can do is try and understand and learn what you can. But I wouldn't ever become overly reliant on it. I don't think I'd build a business around it or yet, or I'd outsource stuff I can do myself to it. But I'd lose skill, cognitive thinking, or I'd lose the ability to draw or to conceptualize. I would never do that.
I was listening to another podcast recently, and they had a philosopher on it who was heavily immersed in the world of technology, knew all the founders of the main companies, had grown up with them in a sense, had lived with them and worked with them for a very long time. And I'm just going to plug extra power in, speaking of technology. And it was the first time I realized that we need philosophers now to tell us and remind us what it is to be human now. And we need to start asking those questions again about purpose, and what are we meant to be doing? Because if we're creating these AIs to take away our purpose, which is ultimately what they're doing I keep reading about the amount of capital that they've raised, the only way to then feasibly to repay that is to take on every single industry in the world, thus rendering all humanity useless in a sense, like law or finance or whatever it may be, medicine, everything. You just won't need people. It will take people out of the equation, which will justify the returns that are imagined with these stratospheric sort of capitalizations, market capitalizations they currently have. And we need philosophers to remind, it's like a balance. It's not a politician or a tech bro to tell us. We need a philosopher to sort of to do the heavy thinking now on where we're all going.
Like an economist to be like, because really, like, businesses sprout up out of nowhere, like a need, fundamentally business is to service a need, isn't it? Like, there's a gap in the market. How do I plug that need? I don't need to tell that to you. You're a businessman. I think with AI, it's like, what was the need to make things faster? Do we need the time? Like, we fill our time. If you look at screen time and mindlessly scrolling, like, I don't, it's like the sort of the advent of white goods and washing machine, it's going to free up time. I don't think people have more time. And to outsource everything, people, as I said, people might think this is utopia where we all sort of sit around creating, but equally you could have a lot of sort of disaffection, like, and disassociation about what it means to have purpose and to have drive. Whether I don't think AI can do everything either. AI can't have nuanced conversations or can read the room And also what the other thing people won't necessarily talk about, or they may do, of course, but is that you create this monoculture because everything that is generated goes back out into the machine. So it's a sort of law of diminishing returns. And you can see that even the way people communicate on LinkedIn, these sort of AI-enabled posts. It all sort of sounds the same now. Articles all sort of read the same. This is the problem and here's why it matters. And sort of start with something kind of incendiary like, brands are dead and here's why. And, all these sort of stupid things. And someone's got a thought piece, someone's got a think piece on it. And like, here's my hot take. And it's all been enabled by AI, but it's all going to be
with incredibly good grammar. Everyone's grammar now is so good. There's all these colons and things I never ever imagined using. You can just see it all now on these AI-enabled posts. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I would say that look, as someone, my dad studied linguistics, so he could tell you what sort of a dangling modifier is and the correct use of a colon. I mean, and maybe AI is correct, but it's sort of so overused
that's what I mean. It's so overused. It's not reading the room, and it's perfect, but in an imperfect way, whereas you can acknowledge, you can see it straight away. You're like, none of us have ever used a colon and semicolons in that frequency. It's so simply no one.
And it doesn't allow for anything incidental, because I think some of the best, so really interesting work, I think, has come out of a happy accident. So people have made these great discoveries, haven't they? From and I'm not much of a historian, but I know they've made these sort of discoveries through accident. And it's like
most of the wonderful things that have been discovered historically have been wonderful accidents. So I live in, I told you where I live, and they've got St Mary's Hospital where they invented penicillin. And the guy, he left his little petri dish on the thing. He didn't really know. It was luck. It was pure luck that he found penicillin that way. So many things like that,
isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
That was going to be my exact, because you hear about that, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it was a happy accident. And I think there's been loads of developments throughout history, and also you hear about film, your classic films, and actually no, we didn't know that was going to happen, but then the actor did this, and then they reacted.
Or the set was, or the weather was shocking, and the set got burnt down, or there's all these challenges and random. Yeah. Completely.
Yeah, and so AI you can't program an accident. You can't you won't get that spontaneity.
You can't program life, the irrationality or the randomness of life.
Exactly, and even actor's choice. I mean, if you think about filmmaking now, I think The Odyssey is an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's all being built in camera, but I think, captured, a lot has been captured in camera, but I think the role of an actor who spends decades training, and you can just tell when an actor sets on, or a voiceover artist, there's such a talent, and even a director that just has this vision, and it is a vision. It's made in the mind's eye of how am I going to execute on this? And I don't think an AI can do that.
Well, also interesting, you mentioned The Odyssey. It was all done in camera, as you said, and look at this huge success it's been. I think we'll see much more of a backlash towards AI. I just wrote about the fact that the EU have just put in a new law that's come in about they have to reference AI now in I'm going to ruin this, but in filmmaking, as far as I'm aware, in creative ways, they have to share if AI has been used. I'm not sure how they're going to achieve that, but it's a start somewhere, and I'm sure that let's hope a balance. I was about to say, I'm sure a balance will happen. I think that's way too optimistic. Let's hope a balance comes about again, putting where we see where AI is going with human reality, and we don't give over all our cognitive abilities, so we're left more like that Wall-E film. Do you remember when the Wall-E animation film? Did you ever remember that with the little robot Wall-E?
Yes.
And then all the people are left they're just like blobs floating around. They're totally they've completely forgotten about everything, and they've given over all their cognitive abilities in many ways.
It's a bit like Brave New World, isn't it? I mean, you would have read that in high school, and you sort of, this is numbing. But I think what it might be, to your point about, declaring AI, it could be in the way that people get quite sort of, things that are manufactured locally, or this sort of return to craft and handcrafted things, and this, you might end up determining it through your, through money and through what you choose to pay for. So you might pay a bit more for something that's been manufactured in the UK or made locally, for example. With AI, the consumer fundamentally will, there's so much we said about attachment to character and attachment to work. And to go back to advertising, there are these iconic ads that you grew up remembering. I mean, the one that comes to mind for me is I Still Call Australia Home, the Qantas ad of '98, and they flew these kids in a choir to all these locations. I don't know if you've ever seen it. The most, and I think it premiered at the Super Bowl. It's the most iconic ad. I grew up watching it. If someone told me those kids were AI, I'd be like, I feel so duped. And then there's all these documentaries now about what happened to the kids as they grew up, and there's stories that some of them got married, and I think there's life beyond this piece of work, and sometimes people want to know that journey. And that's not to say AI. I think AI is really important in some ways, and it allows filmmakers a chance to make really interesting work. But I don't think it could replace emotions and the other stuff that we love out of films and ads and content.
Yeah. Right, Katharine, this has been a great one. Last question. If you could go back and speak to the 16-year-old who just landed in Naples, what would you tell her about the career ahead?
Oh, no, I don't know. I'd probably tell her to go work in finance and cash out at 29. Go live in Spain. I don't know what I'd say. I really don't. I think I might say to have a bit more courage and study creative writing. But I also think you get to where you get to when you do, like, and everything. And I know it's a cliche, but I think everything's a journey. So my next iteration of my career could be something totally different. So we're always somewhat like what I would tell her. I've had a really good time. So like I probably would say just, you're on a really good path. I've been so lucky, and I've had so much fun, and I'm really blessed. I mean, compared to how some people live in this world, I'm so blessed. So I would just say you're really, really lucky that you've had this incredible experience, that you were able to learn a language and experience the world and stay safe and build a career. So I think that's my answer.
I think it's a great answer, and thank you so much. We have been, no one knows, but we were talking for a long time before this. So thank you for all of your time. And then that's it. I'm just going to say that AdBits is supported by Green Desert. I give fast comparable bids across 14 territories. So that's all across Europe and Latin America. And I can say this hand on heart. I've got 5 partners. They're all the best in the business, all owner operators, highly creative service companies. And I'm very lucky. So